Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. And after Nigel Farage claimed to have already saved money in Kent County Council, which turned out to be savings already actioned by the previous administration, we can turn to Lancashire County Council, also under control by Reform UK now, as there are real cuts being reported. The Reform UK Council have decided to take money from central government funds earmarked for early learning for nurseries, literally selling out children's futures to snaffle a few quid for themselves. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So councils get funding from two main sources: their own tax revenues and grants from central government. We know that since the Tories came to power in 2010, the central government grants have been cut and cut and cut to the point where they're only worth about half as much in real terms now. This has led to councils having to cut services which should not even be a consideration in a wealthy, advanced economy. Councils around the country, including those run by Reform UK, have to make difficult decisions about how to prioritise their much more limited budgets. And regardless of which party runs a council, they do have my sympathy for the politically engineered plight they find themselves in. Although I've tended to have less sympathy for the Conservative ones because it was their party in government who created the self-destructive policy of stripping away state resources. But councils still make decisions. How they prioritise the not enough money still lets us know who they really are. And according to local reporting from Lancashire, Reform UK have decided that early years funding is not a priority. According to the report, the previous council used to pass all 100% of the early years funding from central government directly to the nurseries, providing that early years support. Now the new Reform UK leadership have decided, you don't need all that money, we'll just skim some off for other things instead. Now, of course, there are tangents on a discussion like this which might be worth considering. For example, is it a good idea to have a privatised model for nursery care and education when there isn't enough money to go around? No, of course not. If local authorities ran nurseries themselves, they could not only manage it more efficiently, because there's nothing really efficient about having thousands of small providers being involved, but they could do away with the profit monster. The money would just go further. We can also ask if it's sensible for council services to have to be dependent upon central government funding. Again, it's not ideal, especially as the Conservatives openly admitted that in government, they deliberately took money away from deprived areas, specifically because those deprived areas were run by Labour, their political opponents. The problem, of course, is some of the areas which need the most public service resources are the poorest areas where raising those taxes would be difficult. So you can't just say, well, we should have local councils raising all of their own revenues. It's a consequence of our very uneven regional wealth. But anyway, those are side issues. The key point is that a Reform UK Council has decided that their own priorities allow for money to be taken from early years funding of nurseries. They call it saving money, but for thousands of families and tens of thousands of children, that could mean losing everything. The early years education system in the UK is already described as broken on a financial knife edge. Now the threat of new funding cuts is going to send a shock through the sector in Lancashire, threatening to push it over a cliff. We're told it's about efficiency, but it's not. Efficiency is where you deliver the same for less, but they're not going to be delivering the same. And the real cost isn't going to be paid by the council, but by an entire generation of children. So who's really going to pay the price? Because the UK's childcare sector has been in crisis for years. A lot of attention is on things like, the water industry, energy sector and so on. But childcare is totally unfeasible the way we run it in this country. Long before this latest political move, nurseries were already closing. Research from the National Day Nurseries Association was showing a bit of a trend. We had 199 nurseries had to close in the academic year of 2023 to 2024. And there were 216 closures the year before. So we're getting about 200 a year. Each closure isn't just a failed business. This isn't like, when a Woolworths closed down and people were sad, but it's like, okay, but we can manage. This is a community asset lost. It affects about 50 children at a time. That's over 20,000 children and the families left scrambling in just 2 years. At its heart, the problem has always been underfunding, as it is for almost everything. For years, the rates paid by the government for so-called free childcare hours have never covered the actual cost of providing high quality care. We had this for a few years, didn't we? Rishi Sunak said, oh, I'm going to boost childcare by this amount. And the childcare provider go, you haven't given us the money to do it, mate. You know, a 2025 NDNA study found that while nursery staffing costs were set to jump by an average of 15%, the government funding rates were only going up by 4%. So that forces nurseries into an impossible choice. You take the loss, you pass the cost on to the parents for extra hours and essentials, or you shut down completely. Again, if there's not enough money in the system, stop wasting it on privatisation. But the national system is not yet the fault of Reform UK, right? But into this fragile system, they have used their ideology to point towards what many in the sector fear will be a death blow. The party's platform is all about, despite the way they try to present themselves to left-wing voters, fiscal conservatism and cutting state spending. It views the current childcare system as just another area for deep cuts. Consider the way Reform UK describe what they're trying to do to councils. Everything they say about councils, what is it? Cuts, 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 cuts. Nowhere do they even try to claim they're going to make any service better. Oh no, they did before the election. Oh no, they did. They were going to fix your council, right? But since then, since taking over, whenever they're talking, what are they talking about? Cutting, 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 cutting. Never making anything better. Because they're Tories. The exact policies are still being debated, of course, because they don't know what they're doing. But the direction is clear. They have a belief that the market will sort it all out. But the people on the front lines are telling a very different story. Those numbers speak for themselves. For an average nursery, even a small percentage of funding held back by a local council means a loss of thousands of pounds a year. The difference between breaking even and falling into debt. According to the NDNA again, 92% of nurseries are reporting that the current funding rates do not cover their costs. The UK already has some of the most expensive childcare in the world. This chart is from just a few years ago, and it's 2021. Now, for many families, that funded spot is what makes work possible. Because for a lot of people, childcare at market rates means, well, it costs me more than I'm earning. So therefore, I can't do that work. But then we lose a worker from the economy. You know, when a nursery closes, it creates a childcare desert. It leaves families with no affordable quality options. And it's the most deprived areas that are consistently hit the hardest. Lancashire is not a rich area. Because nurseries there depend more on government funding. Nearly 4 in 10 nursery closures already happen in the 30% most deprived parts of the country. Reform UK's proposed approach threatens to speed that up. It widens the gap between those who can afford private care and those who have nothing. So what's this thinking behind Reform UK's approach? They're making it clear they do not care about the long-term health of our workforce. Because consider that every year of your life is arguably less important than the previous one when you're growing up. The development you get in your first few years sets you up for life. If kids are several years behind by the time they're 5 and enter formal education, catching up becomes almost impossible. And this can be seen in one of two ways. From the point of view of Reform UK's actions. First, that they don't care about having a strong workforce for the future, in which case they're certainly not British patriots. Second, remembering that it's a party paid for by billionaires to run things for billionaires, it could just be another way of keeping kids from poorer families down. Either way, not the sort of priorities I think the voters of Lancashire wanted to see. The current Labour government has acknowledged the funding problem. They've expanded the 30-hour offer to younger children from September this year with several £billion of extra investment. But even that is a struggle. You know, there's still believed to be about £1 billion funding hole because of high demand and low funding rates. Nurseries are already finding it harder to deliver these new hours, facing a reality where any shortfall is unsustainable when 80% of their income comes from the government. And in Lancashire, Reform UK have decided that some of that income from the government is going to get less now. This is about a generation's future. The first 5 years of life are the most critical for child's brain development. High quality early education has a proven lasting impact on everything from social skills to future school performance and lifetime earnings. It's why the last Labour government Sure Start centres were so effective and why they're coming back under this Labour government. Our current national government are saying we need to give kids the very best start in life so that they personally can reach their potential, but also because it's best for Britain if we have as many people as possible getting the opportunities to succeed. But Reform UK are looking at the funding for this, knowing full well that it already isn't enough because nurseries are already closing down, and deciding to take even more money away. By skimming money off this budget for other things, they are basically saying, unlike other councils, that the central government grant for early years provision is actually too generous, and that's why they need to reduce it for the communities of Lancashire. Is that what they voted for? Literally snatching their kids' futures. I mean, it should come as no surprise, of course. Nigel Farage openly, doesn't even hide it, openly claims to be a huge admirer of Margaret Thatcher. Maybe people should be reflecting on that before voting for a party that's more Tory than the Tories. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.